China has become a powerful country to reckon with. Yes, all that. So, if one day India becomes an economic powerhouse like the US and China, is there a possibility of these Western countries plus the US treating India, treating us the same way they are treating China? Yes, this is a wonderful question, brilliant question. So, see, here's the thing about NATO and the US alliances. The objective of these alliances, of NATO or any other alliance the US has, the Five Eyes alliance or any other alliance, the objective is simple. It has a one point agenda to ensure that US, the United States, remains the primary superpower, the only hegemonic force in the world. It is to ensure the continuity of US supremacy and hegemony. That's all. That's a one point agenda. It only serves the US in the long run. Yes, it does throw some crumbs at its allies, etc. But even when it comes to the Five Eyes alliance, the five Anglo-Saxon nations, the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. So these are five nations with the same ethnic structure, the ethnic origin, and the geographical origin, the UK. Even in this alliance, which is supposedly the closest alliance at all, Five Eyes, even in this alliance, the US treats every other country as a junior partner. In the 1990s or 2000s, I believe, the US sold some fighter aircraft to the Australians, and the Australians found that they could not use them to target anything except what the US wanted them to. So the code inside the computers of these fighter plane would not allow Australians to target certain targets. They would need to take permission from the Americans to do that. So basically, these fighter planes that were sold to the Australians were basically useless. So that's how they treat even their closest allies. And then the Australians had to re-engineer the entire computer code in order to make the planes work and be actual owners of the plane, of these aircraft, these F-16s, I think, or F-18s, I'm not sure. One of those two. So the United States will not ever tolerate any country trying to rise to its level. And the strange thing is that the rise of China is all thanks to the US. It's an enormous strategic blunder on the part of Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger. So they thought they could prop China up against the USSR. In another episode, I had spoken about the fact that China and the USSR nearly went to war. The Soviets had actually considered very seriously nuking the Chinese. It was Kissinger, it was Nixon who intervened and threatened the Russians with a reprisal if they were to nuke China, and that's how they saved China. And then they had this diplomacy with the Chinese, and they agreed to support China's industrialization process in the hope they naively believed that if China were to become stronger, more industrialized, and more prosperous, then it would naturally become a democracy. How naive and foolish that sounds today. But it is the Americans that have basically helped China rise to where it is today. China would never have risen to where it is today if it were not for American support throughout the decades since the 1970s, since the late 1960s and early 1970s. So today, America has woken up to the fact that China is potentially an existential threat for them, and therefore they are doing everything they can to some extent to slow the Chinese rise down. If India were to try and rise to that level, it would invite similar, if not harsher, reactions from the United States and from the entire Western world, which is essentially, well, it is essentially run and managed by the United States. So yes, they would treat us not the way they are treating China, they would treat us worse than they treat China, because India is not a strong military power or strong economic power comparable to China. India's economy is much smaller than China's economy. India doesn't have the economic networks and all the alliances and all the dependencies of other countries the way China has. China has been systematically building this up since the 1980s. So even when China was a small, impoverished economy, it was still thinking like a global power. It was planning to be a global power step by step by step. So that is what India lacks. But if India were to aspire to do that, and if India were to take steps to do that, it would invite similar responses from the US and from the West. And you see this all the time. India is slowly rising as an economy and in some other ways, and you can see the hostile reaction of the Western media towards India. It's like hostile across the board. They try and focus on only the negatives. They try and portray India in an extremely negative manner. So you see that all the time anyway. So if India were to really start rising, then God forbid, the reactions will be much harsher.